The crystalline chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with tension as representatives from 47 different species gathered in their designated atmospheric zones. The air itself seemed to shimmer with the weight of the decision they were about to make. At the center of the vast hall, a holographic display showed a small blue-green planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. Earth. Commander Vex of the Arachnid Confederation clicked his mandibles against his translator implant. "The motion before us is clear," his synthesized voice announced. "Humanity has exceeded acceptable parameters of technological advancement. In less than 100 of their years, they have progressed from primitive combustion engines to quantum manipulation. At this rate, they will pose a threat to galactic stability within 5 generations." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled delegates. The Zephyrian ambassador, her gossamer wings catching the chamber's ethereal light, spoke next. "My people have observed their military capabilities. They have weaponized everything from splitting atoms to bending space itself. No species in recorded history has shown such destructive innovation in such a brief time span." The massive form of General Brutus from the Titan Collective leaned forward, his rocky exterior grinding against his support platform. "They are unpredictable. Our behavioral analysts cannot establish consistent patterns in their decision-making processes. This alone makes them a Class 7 threat." But it was the soft melodic voice of Elder Crix that cut through the growing consensus. The ancient Vorthan's 3 eyes blinked in sequence as he spoke, each word carrying the weight of millennia. "Esteemed colleagues, you speak of humanity as if they were merely another expansionist species. But in my 15,000 years of existence, I have witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Humanity is different." The chamber fell silent. Elder Crix was the oldest being in the known galaxy, his species having achieved interstellar travel when most others were still discovering fire. His word carried immense weight. "Different how?" Commander Vex demanded. "They consume resources at an alarming rate. They wage war against their own kind. They pollute their environment with reckless abandon. They exhibit every characteristic of a species destined for self-destruction or galactic conquest." Elder Crix's central eye focused on the holographic Earth. "That is precisely what makes them unique. They should have destroyed themselves ages ago. By every metric we use to measure species survival, they should have failed. Yet they persist. Not only do they persist, but they thrive in ways that defy our understanding." The crystalline queen of the Nexus Hive, her form refracting light into rainbow patterns, chimed in with her harmonic voice. "Are you suggesting we spare them because they are resilient? The Gorvan Empire was resilient too, until we were forced to sterilize their home system." "No," Elder Crix replied, his voice carrying a note of something the others couldn't quite identify. "I am suggesting that we may not fully understand what we are dealing with. Before we make an irreversible decision, we should examine the evidence more carefully. There are interactions with our own kind that suggest humanity possesses something we have never encountered before. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Sci-Fi stellar conflict is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you're hungry for HFY battles and tales of human valor against alien might, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring these front lines to you." The aquatic delegate from the Deep Reach slowly emerged from his pressure tank, his bioluminescent patches pulsing with concern. "What kind of incidents?" "Our intelligence reports show standard military engagements and diplomatic exchanges." "That is because you have been looking at the wrong data," Elder Crix said, his voice growing more grave. "Request access to the classified behavioral files. Level 7 clearance. What you will find there will challenge everything you think you know about warfare, diplomacy, and the nature of consciousness itself." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien languages as delegates began demanding access to information they had been previously unaware existed. Commander Vex banged his ceremonial gavel, its sound reverberating through the various atmospheric fields. "This council will recess for 1 standard galactic day," he announced. "All delegates will be granted temporary Level 7 access to review the materials Elder Crix has referenced. We will reconvene to examine this evidence before proceeding with the vote." As the representatives dispersed to their various chambers and ships, Elder Crix remained in the council hall, his ancient eyes fixed on the slowly rotating image of Earth. He had seen the classified files. He knew what his colleagues were about to discover. The question was whether the truth would save humanity or condemn them even more swiftly. In the depths of space, the blue planet continued its eternal dance around its star, its inhabitants, unaware that their fate was being decided by beings they had never met, in a place they had never seen, for reasons they could never have imagined. The next galactic day brought a different atmosphere to the council chamber. The usual pre-session chatter was replaced by an uncomfortable silence as delegates processed what they had read in the classified files. Commander Vex called the session to order, his mandibles clicking with barely contained agitation. "The evidence before us," he began, "is unprecedented. We will now hear testimony from field operatives who have had direct contact with human subjects. Agent Dara of the Sylvani Reconnaissance Division will present her findings first." A slender, blue-skinned humanoid stepped forward, her silver hair catching the chamber's light. Her voice carried the musical quality typical of her species, but there was something strained about her tone. 3 years ago, I was conducting routine surveillance of human colonies in the Outer Rim. My ship suffered critical damage during a stellar storm and crashed on the human settlement of New Haven. The holographic display showed a barren planet dotted with small domed structures. I was severely injured, my cloaking technology was damaged, and I was discovered by human colonists. According to all our behavioral models, they should have either killed me as a threat or captured me for study. Instead, Dara paused, her large eyes reflecting something that might have been confusion. Instead, they carried me to their medical facility. They used their limited resources to treat my wounds, despite the fact that I was clearly of non-human origin. When I regained consciousness, I found myself in a private room with their chief medical officer, Dr. Morgan Kane, monitoring my vital signs. The chamber stirred with interest. The Hive Queen's crystalline form chimed softly. "Did they interrogate you? Demand information about your species?" "No," Dara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dr. Kane asked me if I was in pain. When I nodded, he administered more of their primitive but effective painkillers. He told me that his daughter had been sick recently, and he knew how frightening it could be to wake up in a strange place feeling hurt and alone." General Brutus leaned forward, his rocky features scraping against his platform. Surely, this was a manipulation tactic. They were attempting to gain your trust before extracting information. "That is what I assumed," Dara continued. "But over the following weeks, as I recovered, I observed their society closely. They shared their limited food supplies with me. Children would leave small gifts outside my door: flowers, drawings, primitive toys. When a supply ship arrived, they negotiated for medical equipment that would better suit my physiology, despite the significant cost." Elder Crix's 3 eyes blinked in sequence. "Tell them about the rescue mission." Dara's expression grew even more troubled. "On my 4th week there, a mining accident trapped 12 colonists in a collapsed tunnel. The rescue effort required all available personnel and equipment. Logic dictated that I should be abandoned or at least given lower priority. Instead, Dr. Kane assigned 2 of his staff to ensure my continued care, even though this meant fewer people for the rescue operation." The aquatic delegate surfaced from his tank, bioluminescent patches pulsing rapidly. "This makes no tactical sense. You were a potential threat and resource drain during a crisis." "That is precisely what disturbed me," Dara said. When I confronted Dr. Kane about the illogical nature of his decision, he looked at me with what I can only describe as genuine confusion. He said, "You're hurt and alone. We don't abandon people who are hurt and alone. That's not who we are." The chamber fell silent as the implications of her words settled over the assembled delegates. Commander Vex's mandibles clicked nervously. "Agent Dara, in your professional opinion, was this behavior typical of the human population you observed?" "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "It was universal. From the youngest child to the eldest adult, they consistently prioritized the welfare of others over their own immediate interests. Even when resources were scarce, even when it cost them dearly, they maintained this pattern of behavior." The Zephyrian ambassador's wings fluttered anxiously. "But surely this was confined to their own species?" Pack loyalty is not unusual in primitive societies. No, Dara said, her voice growing stronger. They extended this behavior to me, a complete unknown. They had no way of knowing if I was dangerous, if I carried diseases, if I was part of an advanced scouting force. Yet they risked their lives and resources to preserve mine. Elder Crick stood slowly, his ancient form casting long shadows across the chamber. Agent Dara's experience is not unique. We have 17 similar reports from different sectors of the galaxy. Humans consistently demonstrate this behavior pattern across all contexts: military, civilian, first contact, and crisis situations. The crystalline queen's form refracted light into sharp, agitated patterns. Are you suggesting that humans are somehow genetically predisposed to self-sacrifice? That would be an evolutionary impossibility. Not self-sacrifice, Elder Crix corrected. Something far more complex. They possess an innate drive to preserve and protect life, regardless of its origin. They form emotional bonds with beings they have never met, species they have never encountered, and individuals who pose potential threats to their survival. Commander Vex's voice carried a note of growing alarm. If this is true, then the threat assessment changes dramatically. A species that behaves irrationally in crisis situations cannot be predicted or controlled. Or, Elder Crick said quietly, perhaps we need to reconsider what we define as rational behavior. The third session of the Council brought new revelations that sent shockwaves through the galactic community. Commander Vex had requested the presence of Admiral Cora, the highest-ranking military officer in the Quadrant Defense Force, to present classified operational reports. Admiral Cora, a battle-scarred veteran of the Nexus border wars, approached the central platform with the measured steps of someone who had seen too much combat. Her cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on the assembled delegates. The reports I am about to share are classified at the highest levels, she began, her voice carrying the weight of military authority. They detail human behavior during 3 separate crisis situations that occurred within our territory over the past 5 years. The holographic display shifted to show the Kepler Station, a massive mining facility orbiting a gas giant. 18 months ago, Kepler Station experienced a catastrophic reactor failure. The facility housed 3,000 workers from 12 different species, including 200 humans who were part of a joint engineering project. The image zoomed in to show the station's evacuating ships. Standard protocol called for species segregated evacuation, each race responsible for their own people. The humans ignored this protocol entirely. Admiral Cora's expression grew grave. Captain Lisa Park, the human engineering supervisor, redirected all available human personnel to assist with the evacuation of non-human workers. When questioned by my operations center, she stated that the Vraxian workers were trapped in a section with incompatible atmospheric controls and would die without assistance. The Vraxian delegate, a serpentine being with scales that shifted color with emotion, raised his head. My people were not part of their responsibility matrix. They had no obligation to risk their lives for us. That is precisely what makes their behavior so unusual, Admiral Cora continued. Captain Park's team spent critical evacuation time modifying breathing apparatus for your people. They manually carried 67 Vraxian workers through sections of the station that were flooding with toxic gases. By the time they reached the evacuation ships, they had missed their own designated transport. The chamber stirred with unease. The Hive Queen's crystalline form chimed anxiously. Did they survive? Barely, Admiral Cora replied. They were rescued by the final emergency transport, but only after ensuring that every non-human worker had been evacuated first. When I interviewed Captain Park in the medical bay, she seemed confused by my questions about their decision-making process, she said. We couldn't just leave them. They have families too. Elder Crix's 3 eyes blinked slowly. Tell them about the Frontier incident. Admiral Cora's cybernetic eye clicked as she accessed new data files. 6 months ago, a human exploration vessel, the Endeavor, received a distress signal from the war-torn Arcturus system. The signal came from a Graxian refugee ship that had been badly damaged while fleeing their homeworld. The Graxian ambassador, a heavily armored insectoid, chittered nervously. My people were in open conflict with the Terran Federation at that time. There had been 3 separate military engagements in the previous month. Correct, Admiral Cora confirmed. The Endeavor's captain, Marcus Reed, had lost his brother in one of those engagements just weeks earlier. Yet when they intercepted the refugee ship, they immediately began rescue operations. The holographic display showed the 2 vessels connected by emergency airlocks. The Graxian ship was carrying 800 refugees, including 300 juveniles. It was losing life support and would have been dead in space within hours. Captain Reed ordered his crew to transfer emergency supplies and begin taking refugees aboard their ship. Commander Vex's mandibles clicked with agitation. This directly violated their military regulations. They should have reported the contact and awaited instructions. They did report it, Admiral Cora said. But they continued the rescue operation while waiting for orders. When their command structure ordered them to maintain distance until diplomatic protocols could be established, Captain Reed responded that he would follow those orders after the civilians were safe. The Graxian ambassador's exoskeleton shifted, creating a sound like grinding metal. What happened when their reinforcements arrived? The Endeavor had already transferred 600 refugees to temporary safety aboard their ship. Their own life support systems were operating at 150% capacity. When the Terran battle group arrived, they found Captain Reed's crew sharing their personal quarters with Graxian families and converting their cargo holds into makeshift medical facilities. Admiral Cora paused, her expression growing more troubled. But the most disturbing part was what happened next. When the Terran admiral ordered the refugees to be transferred to military processing facilities, Captain Reed's crew refused to comply. They formed a protective barrier on the Graxian families and demanded that the refugees be treated as civilians, not prisoners of war. The chamber erupted in confused chatter. The aquatic delegate surfaced from his tank, bioluminescent patches flashing rapidly. They defied their own military hierarchy to protect enemy civilians? Not enemy civilians, Admiral Cora corrected. In their words, people who needed help. When I reviewed the incident reports, I found that Captain Reed had been formally reprimanded for his actions. When asked if he regretted his decision, he stated that his only regret was not being able to save the refugees who died before his arrival. Elder Crick stood slowly, his ancient form casting long shadows. Admiral Cora, in your professional military opinion, how do you classify this behavior? The Admiral's cybernetic eye focused on the Elder. By all conventional standards, it represents a fundamental breakdown in military discipline and tactical reasoning, but the outcome? She paused, her expression growing thoughtful. The outcome was that 800 non-combatants survived who would have otherwise died, and the incident ultimately led to the ceasefire negotiations that ended the conflict. You are suggesting that their irrational behavior produced a strategically positive result? The crystalline queen asked, her form refracting light into confused patterns. I am suggesting, Admiral Cora replied carefully, that perhaps our definition of rationality needs to be re-examined. Because if this is irrationality, it is the most effective form of irrationality I have ever encountered. The 4th session of the Galactic Council convened with an atmosphere of growing uncertainty. The evidence presented thus far had shaken the foundations of how the assembled species understood conflict, cooperation, and survival. Elder Crix had requested permission to present what he termed the most significant testimony of all. The ancient Vorthan approached the central platform slowly, his 3 eyes reflecting depths of knowledge that spanned millennia. Esteemed colleagues, what you are about to hear will challenge everything we believe about the nature of consciousness, society, and evolution itself. The holographic display activated, showing the emblem of the hegemony, a coalition of 12 species that had dominated the eastern spiral arm for over 2,000 years. The Hegemony Council has requested that their testimony be presented without revealing their current location or operational status. What I am about to share represents the consensus view of species that have had extended contact with humanity. A new figure materialized in the chamber, a tall, elegant being with features that seemed to shift between different species characteristics. This was clearly a holographic representation designed to protect the speaker's identity. I am voice of the collective. The figure announced, its tone carrying harmonics that suggested multiple species speaking in unison. "We speak for those who have witnessed the ... transformation." Commander Vex's mandibles clicked nervously. "What transformation?" "The transformation that occurs when our species interact with humans over extended periods," the voice replied. "It begins subtly. A change in perspective. A shift in priorities. But over time, it becomes something far more profound." The display showed images of various alien settlements, advanced cities, orbital stations, and colony worlds. "These are before images of our major population centers. Note the architectural emphasis on efficiency, the clear species segregation, the resource optimization patterns typical of our civilizations." The images shifted to show the same locations from more recent time frames. The difference was striking. The cities showed mixed architecture, integrated living spaces, and what appeared to be recreational areas that served no obvious utilitarian purpose. "These are the same locations after 5 years of regular human contact," the voice continued. "The changes are not merely cosmetic. They represent a fundamental shift in how our societies function." The Zephyrian ambassador's wings fluttered anxiously. "What kind of shift?" "The humans introduced concepts that we had never considered relevant to survival or advancement," the voice explained. "They spoke of things like quality of life, individual fulfillment, and community well-being. Initially, we dismissed these as primitive emotional responses. But then we began to observe the results. New holographic data appeared, showing productivity statistics, population growth rates, and what appeared to be psychological wellness indicators. After implementing human-suggested modifications to our social structures, we experienced a 23% increase in innovation, a 47% reduction in internal conflicts, and something we had never measured before, a quantifiable increase in what humans call happiness." General Brutus leaned forward, his rocky features scraping against his platform. "These improvements came from copying human social structures?" "Not copying," the voice corrected. "Transformation. The humans did not attempt to impose their ways upon us. Instead, they demonstrated through their actions that there were alternatives to the competitive, efficiency-focused models we had always assumed were optimal." Elder Crix's central eye focused on the assembled delegates. "Tell them about the Proxima incident." The voice's form shifted, becoming more somber. 3 years ago, our research facility on Proxima encountered what we believed to be a catastrophic failure in our genetic modification programs. One of our experiments had created a biological agent that was rapidly spreading through our population, causing severe neurological damage. The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. The Hive Queen's crystalline form chimed softly. "A plague?" "Worse," the voice replied. "The agent was specifically designed to target our neural networks. It would have destroyed our capacity for higher thought within a generation." We had already begun implementing sterilization protocols for affected populations when the human research team arrived. Admiral Cora, still present from the previous session, spoke up. "What were the humans' initial recommendations?" "They refused to implement the sterilization protocols," the voice said. Dr. Emma Roberts, the human team leader, stated that killing the infected population was not an option we will consider. Instead, they proposed something that we found incomprehensible: caring for the affected individuals, while simultaneously searching for a cure. The aquatic delegate surfaced from his tank, bioluminescent patches pulsing rapidly. "That approach would have consumed enormous resources with no guarantee of success." "That is precisely what we told them," the voice agreed. But Dr. Roberts responded in a way that fundamentally altered our understanding of the situation. She sighed. "These aren't just data points in a research study. They're people. They have names, families, hopes, and dreams. We don't abandon people." The chamber stirred with the now familiar discomfort that seemed to accompany every human behavioral report. Commander Vex's voice carried a note of growing alarm. "Did they find a cure?" "Yes," the voice replied. "But, more importantly, they taught us something about the nature of consciousness itself. While working alongside the infected individuals, treating them as beings worthy of care and respect rather than failed experiments, We discovered that many of them had developed enhanced cognitive abilities in areas unaffected by the plague. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembly. The crystalline queen's form refracted light into sharp, agitated patterns. Enhanced abilities? The humans recognized what we had missed, the voice explained. The biological agent wasn't just causing damage, it was causing evolution. By caring for the affected individuals instead of eliminating them, we were able to study and eventually replicate the beneficial aspects of the changes while eliminating the harmful ones. Elder Crix's 3 eyes blinked in sequence. And the result? Our entire species has undergone voluntary enhancement based on the research, the voice admitted. We are now more intelligent, more creative, and more capable of cooperation than ever before in our history. But more than that, we have become more human. The word hung in the air like a challenge to everything the Council thought they understood about evolution, survival, and the nature of consciousness itself. The final session of the Galactic Council convened with the weight of the galaxy's future hanging in the balance. The evidence presented over the previous days had shaken the foundations of everything the assembled species believed about survival, evolution, and the nature of consciousness. Elder Crix stood at the center of the chamber, his ancient form seeming to carry the accumulated wisdom of millennia. "Esteemed colleagues," he began, his voice carrying a gravity that silenced even the most restless delegates, "we stand at a crossroads that will define the future of our galaxy. The evidence before us suggests that humanity represents something unprecedented in the known universe, not a threat to be eliminated, but a catalyst for transformation." Commander Vex's mandibles clicked with nervous energy. "Elder Crix, the evidence you have presented is disturbing, but it does not change the fundamental risk assessment. If humans can transform other species so dramatically, what prevents them from transforming us in ways we cannot control?" "That," Elder Crix replied, "is precisely the question we must answer. But first, I must share with you the most classified intelligence in our archives, the testimony of the architects themselves." The chamber fell into shocked silence. The architects were the legendary first species to achieve interstellar travel, the builders of the ancient gate network, and the mysterious beings who had vanished from the galaxy over 50,000 years ago. Most species considered them a myth. A new holographic figure materialized, tall, ethereal, with features that seemed to shift between familiar and alien. "I am the last architect," the being announced, its voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in dimensions beyond sound. "I have observed this galaxy for 50 millennia, watching species rise and fall, evolve and stagnate, conquer and destroy." The assembled delegates sat in stunned silence as the implications of this revelation sank in. The architects had not vanished, they had been watching. "In all my observations," the last architect continued, "I have never encountered a species like humanity. They possess something that we lost long ago, something that every advanced civilization in this galaxy has lost or never possessed, the ability to see beyond themselves without losing themselves." The Hive Queen's crystalline form chimed with barely contained excitement. "What do you mean?" "Most species evolve along predictable paths," the last architect explained. "They develop intelligence, technology, and social structures optimized for survival and expansion. But in doing so, they lose something essential, the capacity for what humans call compassion and empathy for beings outside their genetic or cultural group." Elder Crix's 3 eyes blinked in sequence. "Tell them about the pattern." "Throughout galactic history, we have observed a consistent pattern," the last architect said. "Species achieve interstellar capability, establish territories, compete for resources, and eventually either destroy themselves or each other. The survivors become efficient but emotionally sterile civilizations focused solely on preservation and control." The aquatic delegate surfaced from his tank, bioluminescent patches pulsing with agitation. "Are you suggesting that technological advancement requires the loss of emotional capacity?" "Not requires," the last architect corrected. "But in every case we have observed, it has been the outcome. Every civilization that has achieved galactic significance has done so by prioritizing logic over emotion, efficiency over compassion, and survival over sacrifice." General Brutus leaned forward, his rocky features grinding against his platform. Except for humans. Except for humans, the last architect agreed. They have achieved remarkable technological advancement while maintaining, even strengthening their capacity for emotional connection across species lines. They represent something we thought was impossible, an advanced civilization that has not lost its soul. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien languages as delegates struggled to process this revelation. Commander Vex banged his ceremonial gavel repeatedly before order was restored. But surely, the Zephyrian ambassador said, her wings fluttering. Anxiously, this emotional capacity makes them unpredictable and dangerous? On the contrary, the last architect replied. It makes them the most predictable species in the galaxy. They will always choose to preserve life over efficiency, to help rather than harm, to sacrifice for others rather than prioritize themselves. This is not weakness, it is the highest form of evolutionary advancement. Elder Crick stood slowly, his ancient form casting long shadows across the chamber. The question before us is not whether humans represent a threat to galactic stability. The question is whether we are worthy of the gift they represent. What gift? Commander Vex demanded. The gift of transformation, Elder Crix replied. Every species that has had extended contact with humans has reported the same phenomena. They become more than they were. Not through conquest or conversion, but through inspiration. Humans show us what we could become if we chose compassion over control, cooperation over competition, and love over fear. The last architect's form began to fade slightly. I have watched this galaxy for 50,000 years, waiting for a species that could break the cycle of advancement and stagnation. Humanity represents the first genuine hope for galactic evolution I have ever encountered. Then what do you propose? The crystalline queen asked, her form refracting light into patterns of uncertainty. Elder Crix's three eyes focused on each delegate in turn. I propose that we abandon the original motion to eliminate humanity. Instead, I propose that we establish a new protocol, the protection of transformative species. We will monitor human development not as a threat, but as a precious resource. We will protect them from species that might seek to exploit or destroy them. And we will gradually introduce them to the broader galactic community, allowing their influence to spread naturally. The chamber fell silent as the enormity of the proposal sank in. Finally, Commander Vex spoke. You are asking us to bet the future of galactic civilization on the belief that humans will make us all better? I am asking you to bet on the possibility that better is possible, Elder Crix replied. For 50,000 years, we have built a galaxy based on the assumption that advancement requires the sacrifice of our humanity. What if we were wrong? What if the highest form of evolution is not the elimination of emotion, but the integration of compassion with capability? The vote, when it came, was unanimous. The motion to eliminate humanity was not just defeated, it was replaced with the most ambitious preservation protocol in galactic history. As the council disbanded, the last architect's final words echoed through the chamber. Perhaps now, after 50 millennia of waiting, we can finally learn to be human. And in the depths of space, the small blue planet continued its eternal dance around its star, its inhabitants still unaware that their greatest strength lay not in their ability to conquer the galaxy, but in their capacity to transform it through the simple act of caring for others as they would care for themselves. The galaxy would never be the same.